Afternoon, everyone. Calling to order the House Committee on Consumer Protection and Commerce. It is Tuesday, March 21st, 2023, 2 p.m. We are in conference room 329. We have a lot of things on the agenda today, so we'll be limiting testimony to 2 minutes. For those who are testifying on Zoom, please keep yourselves muted, keep your video off until it is your turn to testify. If you are having technical issues, please use the chat function to contact our IT staff who will help you. Okay, first to testify, we have, first on the agenda, we have SB 504, SD1, HD1, relating to environmental protection. First to testify on this measure, we have Kenneth Fink, Director from the Hawaii Department of Health, in support.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Diana Felton. I'm the State Toxicologist for the Hawaii Department of Health here on behalf of Director Fink. We stand on a written testimony in support of this bill to diminish the amount of PFAS in the environment. I'm here for questions.
Thank you. Next, we have Tina Yamaki from the Retail Merchants of Hawaii in opposition on Zoom.
Aloha and good afternoon. Yes, we are opposed to this measure. You know, the FDA has authorized the use of PFAS in not only food contact applications, but cosmetics as well. And there are tens of thousands of variations of PFAS. It's not just one type of thing. And of course, we don't put firefighter foam in food or in cosmetics directly. There's, like I said, there's different versions of this. What this measure is going to do is ban many cosmetic and personal care products that include but not limited to long wear water and waterproof makeup, anti-wrinkle creams, dental floss, mascaras, foundations, lipstick and lip balm, eyeshadows and liner, nail polish, lotions and sunscreen, shaving cream, toothpaste, mouthwash, hair gel, shampoos and conditioners, perfume and menstrual underwear, to name a few. By banning these products that the FDA seems safe, the choices that consumers in Hawaii will have will shrink considerably. These products may no longer be able to be purchased these products will no longer be available to purchase to Hawaii's consumer. Small local retailers and don't have mainland locations will be forced to sell these products at a loss if they're not able to sell them or sell them at a deep discount. And businesses may also have to pay a large cancellation fee for something that the FDA has not deemed to be harmful to anyone. We hope that you hold this bill. Mahalo.
Thank you. Next, we have Ted Bullen from the Hawaii Reef and Ocean Coalition and Climate Protectors Hawaii in support.
Thank you, Chair Nakashima, Vice Chair Sayama, and members of the committee. Ted Bullen on behalf of the Hawaii Reef and Ocean Coalition and the Climate Protectors Hawaii. These forever chemicals don't seem to ever go away. They're wonderful for their durability, but that's a problem environmentally. They have multiple health effects on animal and human populations, including cancers, reproductive and developmental harm, thyroid disruption, impaired immune function, increased cholesterol levels, and some vital organ damage. As was said, they're in a whole broad range of products. I won't repeat them because they were just listed, but because of the difficulty of these of getting rid of these chemicals, and because of the apparent health effects, which admittedly need more scientific study, they seem to be dangerous, and I think it's precautionary to ban these products because once they're here, we never get rid of them. Strong support of this bill. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. Available for questions.
Thank you. Are there any other persons here to testify on this measure? Please go ahead.
Angela Melody Young, testifying on behalf of CARES in strong support. So the purpose of this act is to prohibit the manufacturing, sale, or distribution of the products that contain PFAs. So if we look at the city, it did implement effective January 1st, 2021, that no businesses shall sell polyester foam foodware, disposable plastic, or what we know as single-use plastic, because the production of those toxic chemicals and products are very bad for the planet. So you can see that there was effective implementation by the city, and the city's department regulates trash recycling, such as through the Department of Facility Maintenance and the Department of Environmental Services. So I would implore the legislature to work with the city and to access the data points from the city in regards to the toxicness of these pollutants and chemicals. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Are there any other persons here to testify on this measure? Seeing none, members, we have written testimony in support from Neighborhood Board number 34, Kauai Climate Action Coalition, Sierra Club of Hawaii, Environmental Caucus of the Democratic Party of Hawaii, Friends of Hanauma Bay, Wild Kids Board of Water Supply, Hawaiian Ironworkers Stabilization Fund, and several individuals. We also have written testimony in opposition from the American Chemistry Council, Personal Care Products Council, Consumer Brands Association, Chamber of Commerce Hawaii, Hawaii Food Manufacturers Association, and an individual, and we have written testimony with comments from the Maui Chamber of Commerce. Members, are there any questions? Representative Lowen.
Sure, for Department of Health. Thanks. Just curious, we had testimony about FDA approval. Do you, and I'm not sure if this falls under what you look at, but I know that the EPA recently is looking into designating at least certain types of PFAS and PFOAS as hazardous waste. So do you think that will change approvals that have been previously granted by the FDA?
That's a great question. In my understanding, the FDA has not done thorough evaluation of how much contribution to a person's exposure to PFAS are coming from the personal care products. So PFAS are all around us in the environment, and we're getting them from lots of different places. So depending on the kind of food you eat or the products you use or the water you drink, they're coming at us from all these different places. And what contribution are coming from skincare products or personal care products, I think, is still very much under investigation. So I assume that will be an area of research as we're learning that more and more that even small amounts of these chemicals over long periods of time are causing health impacts, as we can see from EPA's changes and adjustments to the allowable levels in drinking water. So I think that's information to come, but really isn't at this point really palpable yet.
And can you just say briefly, I know the EPA recently lowered the thresholds for drinking water, the advisories. Can you just tell us in a little more detail? I know there's confusion between whether it's a threshold or advisory or what it is, and by how much did they lower it?
Sure, that's a complex question, even more complex as of this week. So in June, the EPA lowered the lifetime health advisory for two of the chemicals, the PFOA and PFOS, which are sort of the legacy chemicals. They lowered the sort of threshold for what's assumed to not be a health risk by almost 4 and 5 orders of magnitude, so huge amount. But then so that's the lifetime health advisory number, non-enforceable but sort of a guideline. Then last week, the EPA issued draft proposed maximum contaminant levels, and they are also much lower than the previous lifetime health advisory levels. So they didn't make them as low as the health advisories because the labs can't get that low, but they still made them very low, so around 4 parts per trillion.
So they're basically saying any amount that we can test as being present in drinking water is considered unsafe and unacceptable.
Correct.
Okay, and then when these chemicals are first the question, I guess there was a mention made about all different kinds of PFAS chemicals. Are you at all familiar with what exact chemical version of these are used in things like makeup, and if those would be assumed to have sort of similar impacts on health and drinking water? Or if they're quite different, or
That's a great question also.
Yeah.
So there are hundreds, if not thousands, of these PFAS chemicals. And one of the biggest concerns that we have is that we only know information or any sort of health impact information about a very small handful. So the EPA have identified 6 of the thousands of which there's enough information to even make determinations about. So, of the many others of the new, what we call replacement chemicals, there's no information. We don't know if they're more toxic, less toxic. It's really a big black box.
So those get approved by the FDA even when we don't know that they're more toxic or less toxic. Okay. And would you, as just like a scientist, I mean, I know this isn't coming from EPA, but like, if they're like largely chemically similar, would there be like sort of would you lean in the direction of saying there's a likelihood that they would also have similar health impacts? Or is it hard to say?
That's a really complex question also. There has been a lot of work done trying to classify these chemicals to try to put them into buckets based on their chemical structure and their chemical reactivity, and we haven't been super successful. So for example, when they were stopping the use of PFOS and PFOA, the thought was if you make a shorter chemical like these chemicals, that it was going to be less toxic. So one of the replacement chemicals is what we call HFPO, which is Gen X. And it was a very popular replacement chemical in some firefighting foams and in other products. And everyone thought it was going to be much less toxic than PFOS, but the more we learn, it's actually probably just as toxic. So we have not yet been able to identify features of the different chemistries that help us identify their toxicity and exactly how they're toxic and how much they're toxic. So it's difficult to say whether unstudied chemicals are more toxic or less, but there really isn't good evidence to say they're less or more.
And then last question. In terms of what is present in things like makeup and cosmetics and things that we put on our body, assuming that some of those we may not have a lot of information about, some we know are toxic. But if they're in makeup, on our skin, on our bodies, they would make their way into the water supply also, I would presume.
Yep, so they'll make their way into wastewater for sure.
Yeah.
Because they'll be washed off in the shower and et cetera. If going from the wastewater into the drinking water really depends on the individual place. Certainly the wastewater a lot of times does release into the ocean, so they will be making their way into the ocean.
And then do these chemicals absorb through the skin? Like would they impact your health from that direct application?
Much less so. So some of them may have some skin absorption, but it's really, the concern would be much more that you get it on your hands, get it on your food, and then you ingest it. The skin route is not a particularly high way of exposure.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you, members. Any other further questions? Representative Onishi.
Yeah, for the Department of Health. So Chapter 321, who enforces this chapter?
I'm going to have to get back to you on that. I believe that's a Department of Health statute, so I believe that does fall under the Department of Health, but at this time there would not be enforcement available. We don't have the resources for enforcement, and that is not included in this bill.
So, okay, so in reading this bill, it says beginning December 31st, 2026, right? It shall be unlawful to manufacture, sell, offer for sale, distribute for sale, or distribute for use in the state any food packaging, food service ware, cosmetic or personal care product that contains PFAS. Does that include, in your interpretation, the importing of products that may be packaged with these?
That's a good question. I'm not an attorney, so I am not exactly certain how to interpret it, but that would, as a scientist from a limited, evaluation, I would interpret it that we would not want PFAS-containing products imported into Hawaii.
So any product that that includes this would be illegal to sell it in Hawaii.
That is my
Based on the
understanding of the way the statute is written. But I believe there are exceptions built into the bill as well.
Okay, well, I don't see it. Chair, if I might?
Please go ahead.
The retail manufacturers, I'm sorry, retail merchants, is Tina Yamaki here?
Right here.
Hi, Tina. Thank you for being
Hi.
here. So, do you have any idea how many products for sale in Hawaii this would affect?
Tens of thousands.
So in essence, tens of thousands of products, if their manufacturers don't change, and basically it's packaging, right?
Some of it is packaging, yes.
Yeah, so if they don't change, we wouldn't have those available in Hawaii.
That's correct. And Hawaii's consumer base is too small for manufacturers to change the way that they're packaging or how they do products. So basically, they just won't send them to Hawaii anymore.
Okay. Any idea what the economic impact would be?
No, I don't. But I know makeup, any type of product, whether it's toothpaste, shampoos, and stuff, that's huge sellers here in Hawaii because a lot of it is something that we need.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, any further questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll be moving on to SB 459 SD2 HD1 relating to hydrogen fueling system subaccount. First to testify on this measure, we have Leo Asuncion, Chair of the Hawaii Public Utilities Commission, in support.
Good afternoon, Chair Nakashima, Vice Chair Sayama, and members of the committee. I am Ashley Norman, Utility Analyst at the PUC, and we stand on our written testimony. I am available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other persons here to testify on this measure? Seeing none, members, we have written testimony in support from Cervical Pacific Inc., Alliance for Automotive Innovation. Members, are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll be moving on to SB 428 SD1 HD1. This is relating to cesspools. First to testify on this measure, we have Kenneth Fink, Director from the Department of Health, in support.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm John Nagato from the Department of Health, and we stand by our written testimony in strong support of the measure. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Melanie Landers from the University of Hawaii in support on Zoom.
Good afternoon. My name is Melanie, and I represent the University of Hawaii Sea Grant College Program and the Water Resources Research Center. And we stand in support and on our written testimony and are available if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Lindsay Garcia from the Hawaii Realtors in support.
Thank you. Stand in strong support.
Thank you. Next, we have Ted Bolin, Hawaii Reef and Ocean Coalition in support.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Ted Bolin for the Hawaii Reef and Ocean Coalition in strong support of this bill. I've been working on cesspool and wastewater issues for 15 years. I was a Deputy Attorney General representing the Department of Health. It makes good sense for the counties to do the kind of planning that this bill calls for, especially with the financial strategies that they need to employ. The counties are going to be a big part of the response to the cesspool problem, and it's important that they get their acts together with regard to planning. So we're in strong support of the bill. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Next, we have Stuart Coleman from the Wastewater Alternatives and Innovations in support on Zoom.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Stuart Coleman, and I'm the Executive Director and co-founder of VI, Wastewater Alternatives and Innovations. And with Ted, I was on the cesspool conversion working group for the last 4 years, and this bill contains several of our highest priorities in that group. So I'll stand on my written testimony and be available for questions or comments afterwards. Mahalo.
Thank you. Are there any other persons here to testify on this measure? Please go ahead.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, and the committee. Angela Melody Young testifying on behalf of CARES. We're just going to provide comments so the purpose of this act is to require the city to develop a comprehensive integrated plan. And the state is delegating the task. So we're going to provide comments that perhaps the state should also consider working with nonprofit organizations such as Surfrider, Parlay for Oceans. These are environmental protection, ocean sustainability, marine biodiversity marine biodiversity organizations that work in this work in the cesspool initiatives collaborative efforts. For example, Surfrider from last year helped to legislate and advocate for HB 2195, HB 2088, and HB 1806. The three bills work in parallel to provide critical financial incentives to homeowners and business owners to upgrade their cesspools. And it represents the first state funding for cesspool conversions, and it established a pilot program and provided grants. So if the state can consider the efforts of not only the city, but also nonprofit organizations such as Surfrider, who can help advocate, it would be a good thing. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Are there any other persons here to testify on this measure? Please go ahead.
Hello, committee. My name is Kevin McClintock, and I'm here as a homeowner. In regards to the cesspool bill, I don't disagree with the bill, but I would like some language put in there. Specifically, I went to get a building permit in 2015, approved by the city and county, but the state wastewater disapproved it. They said I had to upgrade. I had a cesspool at the time. So since then, I've upgraded, and now the bill is being passed around where they're going to, I guess, demand a connection to a sewer if it is available. Currently, I don't have sewer available where I'm at, but I did upgrade my cesspool. So I'd like to, because of the financial investment I've made, over $50,000, I'd like for some language to be put in the bill to exempt me from having to be mandated to connect to the sewer system if it is put in, because typically the cesspool lasts many, many decades, and I just put mine in as brand new. So I'd like to see that language put into the bill to give a sewer connection exemption to people who have already upgraded because of the financial investment. And if I had to hook to the sewer and pay the sewage fees, now I'm stuck with a mortgage I've taken out to put in the cesspool and sewer fees, so it's a financial burden despite it's on fixed income. Also, the cesspool working group has just started a program where they reimbursed up to $20,000 for a cesspool upgrade, and they started accepting applications on 15 March, but they only offered the upgrade reimbursement back to July of last year. I'm not sure if you're aware, but the tax credit for cesspools expired in December of 2020. So I'm in that period when I couldn't get the tax credit, and I'm not qualified for the upgrade exemption or the upgrade reimbursement. So by 54 days, I missed it. So my cesspool went into commission in April of last year, and the qualification for the cesspool working group reimbursement starts in July, so I missed it. So this is in my testimony. I'm just here to add color and add a face to my testimony. The details are in my statement there. So I appreciate your time and your consideration and my two suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other persons here to testify on this measure? Okay, seeing none. Oh, please. Okay, members, we have written testimony in support from Friends of Hanauma Bay. Let's see. Wild Kids, Environmental Caucus of the Democratic Party of Hawaii, Ulupono Initiative, Coral Reef Alliance, Surfriders Foundation, and several individuals. We have written testimony from an individual in opposition and written testimony with comments from the Grassroots Institute of Hawaii. Members, are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll be moving on then to HB 781 SD2 HD1 relating to renewable energy. First to testify on this measure, we have Lee Ann Teshima, Executive Officer from the Board of Professional Engineers, Architects, Surveyors, and Landscape Architects with comments.
Good afternoon. My name is Leanne Tashima. I'm the Executive Officer for the ISLA Board, to be short. You have our comments expressing concerns with this bill as written, especially with the current insertion of architects and engineers. I'll be here to try to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Chris Delaunay from the Pacific Resource Partnership in support.
Well, Chair, Chris Delaunay with Pacific Resource Partnership. We stand on our testimony in support.
Thank you. Next, we have Jody Robinson from the Blue Planet Foundation in support. Seeing that she's not here, we'll be moving on to Ted Boland from the Climate Protectors of Hawaii in support.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Ted Boland for the Climate Protectors Hawaii in strong support of SB 781. We currently have a situation where people are waiting for 8 to 12 months sometimes to get permission to install a simple distributed energy system, for example, rooftop solar. This bill would streamline the permitting and enable more people to get the benefits and savings of rooftop solar. So we're basically reducing administrative burdens on people and saving them money. It would also reduce greenhouse gas emissions, which would help the state meet its decarbonization goals. So for all those reasons, we are in strong support of this bill. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. Thank you for moving the bill. Available for questions.
Thank you. Next, we have Sherry Pollock from the 350 Hawaii in support on Zoom.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Sherry Pollock, and I'm with 350 Hawaii. Thank you so much for scheduling this very important bill. We are in strong support of this measure, and we stand on our written testimony, which includes support for the HD1 amendments that restored Section 3 and part of Section 4. This measure is a true game changer. It addresses a critical issue in our state, and that issue is permitting and the extreme backlog that exists. We hear story after story from our members needing to wait up to a year to get a simple permit for essentially a retrofit small solar project. That is unacceptable. We are very disappointed that a couple of special interest entities are using scare tactics and making unfounded claims to try and undermine this important measure. This bill offers a number of critical common sense measures that will streamline permitting without compromising on safety. It is important to note that the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, NREL, developed the Solar app in collaboration with the industry and the building safety community, with funding from the U.S. Department of Energy. This is a proven system. Many jurisdictions on the continent have already adopted this process and as a result have been reaping its benefits. So please do not be taken in by these profit-motivated scare tactics. The only thing that we truly should be afraid of is the climate crisis, which is real and which is here now. Just this week, climate scientists issued a report that declared humanity is on thin ice and that ice is melting fast. Please stand up for our communities that want a safe climate and a better future, and don't let profit-motivated self-interest undermine this very important measure. Climate scientists are calling on every government to massively fast-track climate efforts, noting that everyone must be part of the solution. The pages and pages of support testimony speak for themselves. SB 781 is part of the solution. Please pass this critical measure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we have Reed Mizue from the AIA Hawaii State Council in opposition on Zoom.
Good afternoon, Chair and Vice Chair. My name is Reed Mizue with the American Institute of Architects, AIA Hawaii State Council, and we stand on a written testimony in opposition. I would like to say that we have no opposition to PV, nor towards the state's energy goals at all. So sections 1 and sections 2 are fine with us. However, sections 3 and sections 4 are the sections that we have extreme opposition to because it disrupts HRS 464, which is our state licensing law related to architecture and engineering professionals. We see the backlog at the city as a city matter, and disrupting licensing state law for architects and engineers should not be the route to go. We are in talks with both the Hawaii Solar Energy Association, as well as direct talks with Director of PUNA at the City and County of Honolulu. One of the main measures with the City and County of Honolulu that we are working directly with Director of PUNA with is self-certification. And we have a draft to go in with that with Bill 6 on the city side of legislation for self-certification and for help on this expediting solar projects through. So we prefer the carve-out to be with the city and not with Hawaii state licensing law. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next we have Dave Mullenix from the Our Revolution Hawaii in support on Zoom.
Aloha. Dave Mullenix, representing our 5,000 members and supporters of Our Revolution Hawaii statewide. Passage of SB 781, we stand in strong support of that passage, is essential because there's a huge backlog of permit approval, as you've heard. Some families have to wait up to a year to get a permit. The solar app permit will streamline this down from months to days. As mentioned earlier, the Department of Energy and the Renewable Energy Laboratory developed the solar app in collaboration with industry, as well as including International Association of Electrical Inspectors and International Code Council. Solar app has been implemented in multiple jurisdictions in California and Arizona and has been lauded as a great success. Using Solar App Plus is proven to have no negative impact on inspections. In fact, Solar App Plus projects are 37% less likely to fail inspection than traditionally reviewed projects. So the potential problems listed in testimony in opposition to SB 781 have not proven to be without merit. It's obvious that those opposing SB 781 have not reviewed the actual facts and data supporting it. It's essential that we pass SB 71 because it economically decreases permitting time and installation of solar panels and proves the state's ability to increase the number of solar panels on rooftops and parking lots and helps the state reach its cutting CO2 emissions. We also support keeping in sections 3 and 4. The concerns about those are also without merit. So please pass SB 71. Thank you so much for hearing this testimony. Aloha.
Thank you. Next we have Rocky Mold from the Hawaii Solar Energy Association in support on Zoom.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Rocky Mold with HSEA. We stand on our written testimony in strong support of this bill. We'd like to note that we appreciate the outreach from other stakeholders that have presented testimony, and we're open to solutions for how to improve this bill, and think we're, very, 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 very close to getting to something with very little work, and really strongly support this measure. I'm here for questions if you have them, but thank you so much for hearing this testimony.
Thank you. Next we have Nathaniel Kinney from the Hawaii Regional Council of Carpenters in support.
We stand on a written testimony.
Thank you. Are there any other persons here to testify on this measure? Please go ahead. Ms. Young.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, and the committee. Angela Melody Young, testifying on behalf of CARES. So the purpose of this act is to address administrative barriers to the deployment of energy generation and storage technology systems by requiring government entities in the state that issue building permits to implement Solar APP Plus or something similar. So to simplify, what is Solar APP Plus? Solar Automated Permit Processing Plus is a web-based platform that automates solar permitting for local governments and other authorities having jurisdiction within this matter. And CARES wants to add in a comment. When implementing this measure, it should be for consideration, as one of the previous testifiers mentioned, to work with the city, work with DPP, to integrate data, and then there can be more of an access of resources so that you can streamline and expedite the processes. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Mr. Pacheco, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chair Nakashima, Vice Chair Sayama, and committee members. My name is Mike Pacheco, and I'm here on behalf of IBW 1186, Damian Kim, and the 3,500 members that we represent in strong opposition to SB 781, SD2, HD1. And just to clarify our position, and we are not against by any means the solar APP system and third-party certification process, although we feel that the language in these amendments open up to potential harm to the public and the workers installing. We urge the committee to actually defer this bill so that the stakeholders can actually get together and work out these languages that's more acceptable. I thank you for your time. Aloha.
Thank you. Are there any other persons here to testify on this measure in person? If not, we'll be going to Zoom. I understand that there's a Lauren Zerbel that would like to testify on this measure. Please go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much. Lauren Zerbel on behalf of Hawaii Food Industry Association. We are in support of this measure. It's actually one of our priority issues this year when we had our annual convention. Our members noted that the procurement system was the #1 thing holding them back from instituting renewable energy. So we would ask for your support. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Are there any other persons on Zoom to testify on this measure? Okay, seeing none. Members, any questions? Seeing none, we'll be moving on to SB 285, SD2 HD1 relating to wastewater systems. First to testify on this measure, we have Ikaika Anderson, Chairman Designee from the DHHL in support. Thank you. Next, we have Kenneth Fink, Director for the Department of Health, in support.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, committee members. Stephen Kruger with the Department of Health. We stand on our written testimony and support.
Thank you. Next, we have Lindsay Garcia, Hawaii Realtors, in support.
Good afternoon, Lindsay Garcia again from Hawaii Association of Realtors. We stand on our testimony and support.
Thank you. Next, we have Chris Schuler from the University of Hawaii in support on Zoom.
Good afternoon, chairs, vice chairs, and members of the committee. I'm Chris Schuler. I'm a water quality and wastewater systems researcher representing the University of Hawaii Water Resources Research Center and Sea Grant College program. We stand on the University of Hawaii's written testimony in strong support of SB 285, and I'm available to answer any questions about the bill.
Thank you. Next, we have Ted Bullen from the Hawaii Reef and Ocean Coalition in support.
Thank you, Chair Nakashima, Vice Chair Sayama, members of the committee. Ted Boland on behalf of the Hawaii Reef and Ocean Coalition in strong support of this measure. I served with others here on the cesspool conversion working group for the last 4 years. One of the issues we looked into was technologies. If we're going to upgrade 80,000 cesspools in the next 30 years, we need to, and some of them sooner, we need technologies that are going to make it affordable and effective. And so this bill would provide a method to do that with a pilot program looking into wastewater technologies and implementing some of them. It also appropriates funds for engineers at the Department of Health, which are going to be needed. So in both those terms, it's really a necessary aspect for moving the program of conversion of cesspools forward, and we are in strong support of the bill. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. Available for questions.
Thank you. Next, we have Stuart Coleman from the Wastewater Alternatives and Innovations in support on Zoom.
Good afternoon, chairs, vice chairs, and members of the committee. I would just echo what Ted Boland said. As a member of the cesspool conversion working group for the last 4 years, this was a priority measure. The thing that I would like to highlight the most, though, is the creation of a cesspool section within the wastewater branch. Right now, we do several hundred conversions a year at UH to meet the demand, to meet the mandate to convert all cesspools by 2050. We're going to need to ramp up and do more than 3,000 per year. So it's going to be essential to have a cesspool section. And then, as Ted Boland said, just bringing in new technology. Specifically, I think the greatest need is, instead of converting one cesspool at a time, doing cluster systems in rural and suburban areas where we can convert hundreds at a time. But I'll be available for questions or comment. Mahalo.
Thank you. Are there any other persons here to testify on this measure? Please go ahead, Ms. Young.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, and the committee, Angela Melody Young, testifying on behalf of CARES. We're just going to provide comments, of course, to look for other collaborators outside of the state and the city in regards to cesspools, such as what I pointed out before, Surfrider Parlay, Sustainable Coastlines, but also Zero Waste Oahu, and also the Center of Marine Debris Research from HPU, because these organizations, nonprofits, and schools have already, worked in these sorts of efforts, such as, so for example, the Center of Marine Debris Research worked on inventing it's like a device to address plastic ocean problems. And so the device that the scientists invented, it makes like the plastic, so the sand falls to the bottom of the device and then the plastic floats to the surface. And then the scientific method that they used during the invention was something very unique and original to separate the synthetic material. So, there are organizations and nonprofits that maybe the state doesn't know about that have made a lot of advances in this subject matter. So thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Are there any other persons here to testify on this measure? Okay, seeing none, members, we have written testimony in support from Coral Reef Alliance, the Environmental Caucus of the Democratic Party, Surfriders Foundation, Ulupono Initiative, and several individuals all in support and one individual in opposition. Members, are there any questions? Seeing none, we'll be moving on to SB 426 HD1. SD2 HD1 relating to cesspools. First to testify on this measure, we have Kenneth Fink, Director from the Department of Health and Support. Thank you. And next we have Dawn Chang, Chairperson of DLNR, in support.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members. I'm Park Administrator for State Parks. The department stands on our testimony in support and particularly appreciates the grace period for the recreation questions.
Thank you. Next we have Zuri Aki from the Office of Hawaiian Affairs with comments on Zoom. Okay, we'll be moving on then to Melanie Landers, University of Hawaii, in support on Zoom.
Good afternoon. Melanie, representing the University of Hawaii Sea Grant College Program and Water Resources Research Center, and we stand in strong support, and we are available for questions on our written testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to take note, Mr. Coleman, please turn off your video until it is your turn to testify. Thank you. Next we have Lindsay Garcia, Hawaii Realtors, with comments.
Lindsay Garcia from Hawaii Association of Realtors. We stand on our comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Ted Bolin from the Hawaii Reef and Ocean Coalition in support.
Thank you again, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Ted Bolin for the Hawaii Reef and Ocean Coalition in very strong support of this bill. As previously mentioned, I served on the cesspool conversion working group for 4 years with a number of people here. This was, I think, our largest, most important recommendation. There was a lot of study into which cesspools were causing the most problems, and found that we should stagger these. We've got to upgrade a lot by 2050. Some of them are more damaging to the environment than others. Those are priority 1. There are 13,000 of those. Some of the next group, priority 2, another 12,000. So we're asking that those be upgraded. The first priority 1 by 2030 and priority 2 by 2035. There are exceptions built in for people who are unable to do it in the bill. So there's allowance made for that. But we really need to get going on this program. We can't wait until 2049 and then start upgrading. And we need to do, in order to protect the waters, we need to do work now to upgrade the ones that are most polluting. So we are in very strong support. We thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'm available should you have any questions. Thank you for moving forward with this.
Thank you. Next we have Stuart Coleman from the Wastewater Alternatives and Innovation on Zoom.
Hi there, chairs, vice chairs, and committee members. We'll stand in strong support of this bill, and would just urge that, the state move forward with these earlier deadlines, because as Ted mentioned, this was a consensus in the cesspool conversion working group that it's the only way we'll be able to fulfill the mandate that the legislature passed under Act 125 to convert all cesspools by 2050. Mahalo.
Thank you. Next, we have Gina Salcedo, individual in opposition.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I'm here on behalf of, I'm against this bill, the cesspool. There's a lot of the kupunas in our district side who's being approached by the health department to upgrade. It's not by choice, but by law-abiding citizens, they did do so. And they're all set on a fixed income. And this is, this doesn't benefit the landowners or the leaseholders of Hawaiian lands. This just benefits the nonprofit organizations that's generating the money. And there's some of the bills that I have read, it really is conflict of interest because it's allowing the nonprofit organization to tap into the money on behalf of the landowners. This needs, I asking you folks to listen with your heart and not with a double hat. Some of the committees to wear a double hat. I'm asking this committee to listen with your heart at the old aging kupunas out there, people that makes under $46,000 a year. It was very disturbing when I went just a week ago to the store, seeing a kupuna trying to figure out if she can afford her bread, a bread to eat. And she couldn't afford that. And I said, Auntie, do you need help? She said, oh, because I wouldn't have money if I didn't pay for this medication. So it's actually forcing them against the wall to pay the piper. You have no choice but to do this or put a lien on your property. That's unacceptable behavior. That's not what Aloha is about. That's not what Aloha is about. Aloha, we take care of our kupunas. So I paid for her bread. I paid whatever she was going to take out. Because why? That is Aloha. That's what's in my heart. How many of them going to have to choose?
My apologies.
They can't afford that.
The
They
2-minute
can't.
time limit is up. Can you please summarize your testimony?
My testimony is please think and feel with your heart, not the money chasers. And wear your Aloha heart, your hat. That's all I ask. Thank you. Mahalo.
Thank you. Next, we have Austin Salcedo in opposition.
Hello, I'm Austin Salcedo. Yep, I'm in strong opposition, as others on this working group is in strong support of this, because the timeline they're setting in is going to create everyone on all islands in Hawaiian homelands, property owners, all to be subjected to some type of citation made by the city. The city don't want to do it, but they're going to have to do it. So it's going to create liens, financial penalties. And what's going to happen is people who can't afford even to upgrade can't even pay for these penalties. So there'll be liens made upon their properties. Eventually, there'll be foreclosures again to pay for the penalties. So that's in alignment of this type of movement that is going to happen. And there's no financial assistance whatsoever ahead of time. Federal or state, nothing was was examined or put forward. The carriage was placed before the horse on this measure. That's incorrect for this cesspool conversion working group. And the body of this conversion working group, I stand by Gina Salcedo's, her testimony, saying they were put together because they wear multiple hats. Gentleman on there is supposed to represent the residents, but apparently he's representing a nonprofit group, the Ocean Coalition. How is that? They all stated in their reports that people is going to have hardship. The coalition, Lindsay Garcia stated, 97% of the homeowners cannot afford it. It's in their statement as well. So I actually also for those who actually made the conversion, not by choice, by direction of the Department of Health. I want to amend and insert and incorporate language. This also includes not only landowners of private property or the Department of Homelands, to include commercial landowners and large landowner developers in this Senate Bill
My apologies.
426.
The 2-minute
And
time limit is
landowner
up.
with approved septic system upgrade is fully exempt from the future hookups and or future infrastructure. There's one to be incorporated, the language in
Mr.
this.
Salcedo, can you please summarize your testimony?
And
2-minute
provide
time limit is up.
100% financial relief to all qualified landowners with cesspools upgrading septic systems. This includes financial recovery, tax credits for the previously installed upgrade system, the Department of Health, at least 15 years past, and not limited to acquiring 100% financial assistance from federal, state funding, and to alleviate the financial burden of all landowners. And simply, also, I don't see my representative that represents our district area. This can be the 4th time he hasn't represented our area, okay? And I
Mr.
don't expect you
Salcedo,
folks to give them an excuse by this committee chair. If you don't mind, co-chair, wherever you sit, do not excuse Mr. Cedric Gates. This is the 4th time he hasn't been present in the committee to testify in our behalf of the residents of the Waianae Coast that he represents. That's all I have. I'd like to say more, but please, I'm open for questions later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have
There's not enough time.
Kevin McClintock, individual with comments.
Yeah, I testified earlier on the 428 bill. On this bill, accelerating the conversion to 2030, it is a severe financial hardship. As I stated earlier, it cost me over $50,000 to convert from cesspool to septic. And the current incentive gives you, you have to put it in before you get the incentive, much like the tax credit that was available earlier. So there's nothing up front to convert, and it is very expensive. So I just want to put some figures out there for the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Kevin Suiso, individual in opposition. Is Kevin here? I'm sorry, not Ken Suiso. Case not here. We'll be moving on then. Stephen Spengler, in opposition.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to testify against Bill SB 426. By way of introduction, I have a PhD in hydrogeology and undergraduate degrees in chemistry and geology, and I'm an avid environmentalist. I have no affiliation to any of the parties involved with SB 426 and do not own a property with a cesspool. SB 426 should be rejected because the rationale for the bill is overstated and does not stand up to scientific scrutiny. In addition, implementation of this bill will disenfranchise underserved communities, including Native Hawaiians. A small minority of legacy cesspools located in specific hydrogeologic settings around the state undoubtedly contribute the raw sewage to public waters, and efforts should be taken by the appropriate city and state agencies to correct these isolated cases. However, most existing legacy cesspools in the state of Hawaii do not pose a threat to the environment. The proposed legislation will require mostly low-income homeowners throughout the state. 97% of those impacted by this bill have household incomes less than $120,000 to spend up to $5 billion on cesspool conversions, which will produce insignificant ecosystem and human health benefits. Bill 426 will saddle these low-income citizens with monthly financing and maintenance costs up to 7 times higher than monthly costs paid by generally more affluent citizens that live in areas served by county sewer systems. The numbers I am quoting come from the reports prepared by the Cesspool Conversion Working Group. As a result, I recommend that Bill SB 426 be shelved or rejected, and that the companion bill SB 285 be modified to direct the Hawaii Department of Health to produce defensible scientific data for those specific areas around the state where legacy cesspools are believed to be causing detrimental harm to the environment. This proposed modification would be a far more efficient approach for protecting human health and the environment while sparing mostly low-income citizens living in mainly rural portions of the state from an overdue and onerous financial burden. And to my testimony, I attached 3 recent publications that I've made. One is going to press right now. I collected over 700 samples from streams and springs around the island of Oahu, analyzed them for pharmaceutical compounds down to part per trillion levels.
My
The
apologies,
average
Mr. Spangler,
concentration
the 2-minute time limit is
okay.
can you
The
please
average
summarize?
concentration, just one point. The average concentration of wastewater components in streams and springs on Oahu is 1/100th the concentration measured in streams worldwide. 1/100th. That gives you an idea of the minimal impact that spending $5 billion will do towards improving the environment. I'm free to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Connie Victor, individual in opposition on Zoom.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please continue with your testimony.
Yeah, March 24, 2006 in Waikiki, you guys released 48 million gallons of raw sewage into the Alawai. People got sick with streptococcus flesh-eating bacteria. And last year in June of 2022, you guys released 25 million gallons a day from Honolulu into the Ewa waters. Now, not one of those ecological catastrophes was a cesspool owner involved. Now, you guys building 18,000 more homes in Ho'opili, and you're adding more stress to the systems of you guys wastewater treatment. Oh, you guys building more homes. Now, the fact is, can your guys' wastewater treatment facilities handle all this? Because you guys seem to be the one dumping the sewage in the ocean. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other persons here to testify on this measure? Seeing none, members, are there any questions? Representative Lowen.
I guess, first of all, I guess, Ted, I'll ask you this question. There were a lot of statements made. I feel like I hear, no, come forward. And maybe you can speak to the contents of this bill since you're familiar with it as something that was worked on with the cesspool conversion working group. There's no provision in this bill that puts a lien on any property. And this bill also has nothing to do with any requirements by the city and county to connect a septic system to a sewer system they're putting in. So these are two separate issues. So I'm hearing concerns from people from the Waianae Coast, but I'm concerned that they're being either told things that are wrong or not reading the bill correctly, because those things that are being brought up are not what's in this bill. Can you speak to that?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Chair. You're correct. These are different issues, and there are no liens, there are no foreclosures, and people are not being forced to join on to the sewer system. What we're trying to do is to take advantage of studies that were done, the technologies that were looked into, and the financing options that are there, and try to get people who are currently on cesspools to find a way to put them onto a better system where it's appropriate, or if they're close to a sewer, perhaps extend the sewer with financial help to the counties. There are exceptions that were added, especially in the HD1 bill. So I think there are a lot of misconceptions about this bill and where it's headed. We're not forcing people to do the kinds of things we're wanting to. And if the properties are inappropriate, there are exceptions there. If there's a financing ability problem, there's also exceptions built into the House bill. So yes, there seems to be a lot of misconception about the impacts of this bill. I think they are much more benign and much more appropriate public policy than people understand. Thank you.
Thanks. And then is anyone from UH still on the Zoom? Is Melanie Lander? Oh, are you from UH? Come.
No, I'm not from UH. But
Oh.
I can talk.
Hold on, please.
No.
I'm from UH. This
Oh,
is
hi,
Chris Schuler.
Yeah. Can we had someone here in person give testimony, during the cesspool conversion working group's work, UH was part of that effort. UH did scientific studies looking at how to prioritize based on the known impacts of cesspools. And there's a number of studies coming from various researchers at UH over the years, especially regarding the impact of cesspools and the runoff they contribute to and its impact on coral reefs, which, as I understand, is quite serious. So I was wonder what your response would be to the testimony claiming that there's like no evidence backing up the need for any of these conversions.
That wasn't my testimony.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. There are a number of studies that have been done in various parts of the state. For example, Kuko on the Big Island of Hawaii, windward side of Oahu, the Ewa area, Haleiwa area on Oahu. And those studies did find wastewater impacts in areas that were known to have a high density of cesspools. One of the difficult things with water quality studies is we don't have statewide baseline data. So certainly there's some areas that have lower concentration of wastewater indicators than others. And there's a lot of factors that modulate that, things like tides and currents, as well as the hydrogeology of these areas. So I participated in creating the Hawaii cesspool prioritization tool, and we actually did not include water quality data in that tool because of kind of the discrepancy in available water quality studies around the state. So the thing that we used in that prioritization tool were primarily data layers that had been indicated by other studies to have bearing as risk factors in cesspool impacts. And then I think one of the key things to note also about this is that tool was designed as a prioritization tool to support, I believe it was Act 132, which banned all cesspools in state by 2050. So the tool's intent was to simply prioritize all the cesspools, put them into categories, because Act 132 already banned all of the cesspools in Hawaii. So the bill that's under discussion right now is just moving up timelines, but this is something that has already been decided by the legislature in 2018. And so that was the intention of how we prioritized those different areas. I hope that explains everything.
Sure. One more question. Is anyone here from DLNR? Thanks. I don't know if this is quite your area specifically.
It may not be.
But I'm just trying to get at the data that does exist, or maybe DOH if someone wants to chime in. But I've seen extensive evidence presented sort of about the impacts of cesspools on the reef, and I know that's part of the reason that Division of Aquatic Resources, for example, has been strongly supporting these measures this year. So I don't know if you can speak to that at all.
I appreciate the question, Rep. Lowen. No, the aquatic, there's nobody here from aquatics, right? I'm here from state parks for the Waimea Canyon issue.
Okay,
So I'll
got
defer
it.
to Department of Health for those.
Okay, sure. Department of Health.
Okay, so we are actually familiar with the report that was provided by this gentleman, and it's actually based on stream flow, and I mean that's good data. But then most of the information that we base our the basis of actually upgrading these cesspools is that there's a direct discharge to the groundwater that actually enters the ocean. And there's numerous USGS reports and also studies that were done of the direct impact of these cesspools to the groundwater entering the ocean. So although his information is good about the streams, if you look at the cesspools in priority 1 and priority 2, all these cesspools are actually located in groundwater. So when when there is a discharge, it actually enters the groundwater and goes directly out into the ocean and not into the stream.
Got it. And I guess, I don't know, maybe Ted, maybe you can speak to just some of I know the UH, there's been the numerous UH studies that have been done about the impact of the nutrients released by cesspools, the impact that has on coral reefs. And I just don't want anyone to, I guess, leave with the impression that these don't cause serious environmental impacts, which I think it's pretty well established that they do.
It is very well, thank you for the question. It's very well established that they do. The main concern, I think, is the impact, like you said, on coral reefs from nutrients in the cesspools. A secondary impact is impact on human health when people come in contact with pathogens. Sea level rise is going to make that more common as the cesspools overflow. But they're between the nutrient environmental harm to the reefs and the ocean and the health effects from the pathogens that come from cesspools. They're very serious environmental effects of cesspools, which is really where this all starts. This is a deficient infrastructure system that is not in use in most of the country, long since removed. We are one of the last places to ban new cesspools, and we have a legacy of 80,000 cesspools that are putting 50 million gallons of raw sewage into our groundwater every day. As Sina just said, the effect on the oceans from the discharges to the groundwater are significant. We need to take this problem on, and we need to do it now. Thank you for the question.
Thanks.
Representative Bellotti, did you have a question? I'm sorry, wait, hold on.
I'll pass for now.
Okay, Representative Onishi.
Yeah, Department of Health. How many warnings have you issued this year regarding contaminated water from cesspools or human waste?
We actually haven't issued any warnings on that.
How many warnings have you issued within the last 3 years?
I would actually have to go, because that actually comes from our clean water branch, so I would have to go and check to see, what that is.
So is this a persistent problem that Department of Health is trying to address in regards to the safety of our nearshore waters or stream waters?
So for like the clean water branch, so they don't actually, there's certain parameters that they use, like intercocci, that's not really representative of, say, like sewage. Like when you're looking at like Clostridium, and other fecal bacteria indicators. So then you have intercocci that can be from like, just from stormwater runoff. Okay, but the parameters that the Clean Water Branch uses, per like their EPA discharge standards, it's not really targeted, to bacteria that's actually, kind of traced back to like sewage.
So why is that not the case? Why aren't you guys doing it if it's a huge concern?
That's something that I would have to take it back, because we do have like another clean water branch that regulates our ocean waters.
Okay, so then what are you basing your decision on if it's not scientific data that is measurable in regards to discharge from cesspools?
But it is scientific data, because the University of Hawaii was actually provided, funds through the legislature on like a sewage study, that actually showed, they had various places, statewide. And what they did was they used algae to detect sewage, in the water. And they used this like Delta 19, as a factor to say, okay, there is like sewage, contaminating, these areas. And in the study, it did conclude that a lot of the areas that had high density of cesspools that discharged to groundwater, there was elevated levels of like nitrogen, in the water. So, nitrogen is a concern because, that actually damages, the coral reefs. Just that alone, and I can forward you.
That's a Department of Health study?
That was actually it was actually a part of, I forgot which act, but it was the same act that actually, established the cesspool conversion working group. The legislature actually provided the University of Hawaii with $500,000 to do a statewide sewage study, to do this.
Yeah, I heard the testimony from UH. So they testified about Puoko.
Oh, Puoko, yeah.
Right?
So like Puoko, definitely that area too has numerous studies. that shows
Right.
how cesspool.
How many homes are in Puelco?
I believe there's like about 170 homes in Puelco.
170.
Yep.
And how many of them are still cesspools?
I can't really tell you how many have cesspools.
So when was the most recent study done?
For the Puelco?
For Puelco.
They're actually still studying that area. Yeah.
Okay. So this is a statewide issue that you're basing on 170 homes in a very restricted area, right? Because there's no other developments other than the hotels, which have their own septic systems, that you guys are saying, well, this is a tremendous impact, but there's 170 homes that have been there for over 100 years that have been contributing because there was no other type of septic system at that time.
Like I said, it wasn't actually just based on the Puelco study. You know, the University of Hawaii study actually had areas throughout the state. And actually the purpose of that study too that they used for the LG was actually to validate the groundwater modeling that was done that showed the impacts to the receiving waters. So what that did was it pretty much did validate, you know, how cesspools are impacting our nearshore waters. You know, so that's what that sewage study did.
To reefs.
What?
To reefs.
Well, to the ocean, yeah.
To the ocean?
Yeah, to our.
So how many warnings or prohibitions have you issued because of that, like Puelco, for example?
Yeah, so like I said, you know, that's not actually part of, what is that, our clean water branches, what is that, responsibility for posting that.
Okay, I'm failing to understand the connection. If there's a threat to the water, then warnings should be posted, right? That there is an issue with the cleanliness of the water or the impact of the water. But you're saying that's not your department's job?
Well, I'm not saying that it's the department's job, it's just that, you know, you're asking that, you know, we would have to come up, you know, and then hire more people to actually monitor these areas. But okay.
Well, I mean, you're asking for everybody to convert their cesspools.
Okay, but where do you think the water is going when you discharge, what is that, wastewater into cesspools that are right there on the beach? Where is it going?
Okay, I have another question. So what are upgraded or converted to a director-approved wastewater system? What are those systems?
So right now, we actually have like aerobic treatment units that reduces and, well, that also has ultraviolet disinfection. Those are for areas where cesspools are in groundwater. And then we also have septic tank systems, and then we also have systems that are considered like passive systems where it treats it to like an aerobic treatment unit, what's that, quality, but then it doesn't have like mechanical parts to it.
Do you know how many septic tanks are installed in the state?
I don't know that offhand, but I can get that information for you.
So where does the water from the leaching of the septic tank go?
So it goes from the septic tank and it actually disperses to the ground, you know, through the soil. The soil actually acts as like a filter, you know, prior to it actually like discharging into like the groundwater.
So it acts like a cesspool?
No, it doesn't act like a cesspool. A cesspool is just a hole underground where wastewater just enters. There's like no
Well,
tank.
wastewater enters, but the water seeps through the ground.
Well, but then
and the
it's-
solids stay in the cesspool.
Yes, the solids, no, cesspools are like open pits, so it doesn't necessarily stay in the cesspool. You know, it actually is like an open pit. It just goes into the groundwater. That's what a cesspool is. With a septic tank, you have a tank before you have the leach field. So you actually have the solids contained in the tank, and then you have settling in that tank, you know, before it goes out to a dispersal field, you know, through like a leach field that actually helps with, again, filtering that water. And So like with our regulations, we don't actually allow like say septic tanks, in areas that have high groundwater. Those systems we would require like an aerobic treatment unit, that has like advanced treatment, to reduce like the nitrogen. If we know it's going to, discharge directly into groundwater, we also require like ultraviolet disinfection.
So in high priority areas, you do not allow for septic tanks
That's correct.
because the water that discharges from the septic tank has contaminants in it.
Well, it's not treated as well as the aerobic treatment unit systems.
Well, it's not treated at all, right?
No, it is treated. There is
How is it
clarifica-
treated?
Okay, there is a tank that provides primary clarification, and like I said, it goes and disperses into like a leach field,
Right.
where you still have like the soil. Soil is a treatment that actually provides filtration, prior to it actually entering the like the groundwater. When you have a cesspool, especially if it's directly, connected or it's discharging to groundwater, there is no treatment. There's just a direct discharge into the groundwater. There's no treatment at all.
Okay. If I could have the gentleman
Yes.
come up. Yeah.
Wow.
So, can I get some clarification
Okay,
on the
yeah,
differences between?
so typically cesspools, the bottom of the cesspools are above the water table. There are a few cases where it does intercept the water table. Those obviously are a problem. A cesspool, the solids stay in the cesspool. It's exactly like a septic tank. The only thing a septic tank does is the solids go to a septic tank, and then the liquid gets separated and gets into a leach field. Septic tanks, you spend this $5 billion, there's still nitrate going into the ecosystem. Converting from a cesspool to a septic tank system will reduce the nitrogen, and this is in the working group's legislation, from about 80 parts per million to maybe 40. It'll reduce it in half. It won't eliminate nitrogen. That's why, and the other fact that wasn't in the working group, how the majority of nitrogen enters our coastal waters? Big storms. You have large storm events.
Thank you.
And you can get, there's a study in my testimony that in Cava Stream, where Castle High School is, right? 12-hour storm event produced as much more nitrogen, like 1.5 times the nitrogen from all the cesspools on the entire island of Oahu, discharged into Kaneohe Bay from that one storm event over a 12-hour period. More nitrogen from a 12-hour storm event in a little watershed that represents 1/600th of the area of the island of Oahu. So you just multiply that, what happened during that same storm event, how much nitrogen entered into the coast. Cesspools, your legislation is going to reduce the nitrogen. If you miraculously changed all the cesspools right now in the state and converted them magically to septic tanks, my contention is that you would barely see any measurable impact in the nearshore environment. Another thing is that all of the studies that she was quoting, most of the studies have been done where you take a wastewater treatment plant discharge and inject that. So in those cases, they're injecting millions of gallons a day of water into an offshore pipe, like the Lahaina case, Kihei. That's not analogous at all to cesspools. Cesspools, think about it. And you've got some weird situations. Sorry. A couple of things. You guys are legislators. Look, think of the optics of your legislation. The guy from, your DLNR?
Just address.
You've already written in an exemption for a state agency to the legislation you're going to basically promulgate on the poorest people in your community. I mean, how does that look? And don't get me wrong, I think it's ridiculous that they have to convert the cesspools in Koke.
Excuse me, sir.
Okay,
hold on.
thank you.
Representative
Thank you
Nishi.
for the opportunity.
Oh, no. Wait. Representative Nishi, did that answer your question?
Yeah, he did. Thank you.
Okay. Representative Pilati.
Thank you. Department of Health, please. I just want to take the temperature down a little. I think everyone on this side of the table is very concerned about the public health and risks to the environment, but there is also the economic concerns for our communities. And I will say that very poor individuals may not be able to do the thing that this legislation is mandating. So just a couple of factual questions. How many households would be affected by the priority level 1 designation?
So for priority 1, there would be about 12,500.
Okay, and then level 2, how many?
About 13,500.
Okay. We heard an advocate say that there's nothing mandated in this bill, but as I look at this bill, it says that these priority level 1 properties shall be upgraded or converted to a director-approved wastewater system or connected to a sewerage system before January 1st, 2030. That is a mandate, isn't that?
Okay, but if you read more into that legislation, that was actually put into the exemption where it allows Department of Health to grant an extension in 5-year terms, so that if it's determined that they cannot afford the upgrade, that the Department of Health can actually grant the extension.
Okay, so I see that language, but not in this bill. Is it accurate to say that landowners will be subject to potential warnings, violations, liens, somewhere else in the chapter that gives you folks enforcement authority?
Nope, not at this time.
Clarify that, please. What do you mean not at this time?
Well, it's not enforceable. It's not enforceable now. Right now, it's like at 20. It's like, it's targeted at 2050. But, if this law actually passes, then we will have to do administrative rules to enforce it.
So it's accurate to say that there's somewhere in the law that landowners could now be subject to enforcement if we don't say something explicitly to say that they're not going to be enforced against between 2030 and 2050.
Well, if this turns into like law, then it becomes enforceable.
Okay, and I think that's where the concern is. That's precisely where the concern is, because we have homeowners who are just facing inflation and cost of living and affordable housing cost, and they just don't, they see this as another mandate that they are not, it's going to break their back.
But it also provides an extension to the 2050. So there is that extension that provides the Department of Health the discretion to, if they show that they cannot demonstrate, that they have the funds to upgrade, that we can provide an extension of the 2030 date.
Okay, I see that, but that's part of my caution, is that people are very concerned because of the cost. And I'll just also say, you and I were there when we passed this 2050 mandate, so I support it, but I think how we navigate to 2050 is really important, because homeowners are afraid, and particularly people who lack resources are afraid. One other follow-up question I would have is, we're hearing competing studies, and I think there probably is validity to both sides, that, you folks are looking at different parts, looking at different aspects of studies where it might have been near, a wastewater treatment plant versus cesspools, and how you can determine causation is very difficult, right, when you are looking at, but
there's only one study. There's multiple studies, and it's not only in the state of Hawaii. Because this is actually an issue like on the East Coast. You go to like New York, you go to like Maine, you go to like Florida. There's just so much resources on how, like cesspools. So Suffolk, California, New York, because they got like 300,000 cesspools there. And, you go read the literature over there, they know, that it impacts,
So my question is there any way to further break down through the studies, the multiple studies that you have, in priority level 1 and priority level 2? Because 12,500 households in a 9-year period, and another 13,000 households plus in that same time period is a lot. Is there any way to further break down in level 1 and level 2 so that we really, really, really target the most offending cesspools?
But that was based on our UH report. Those are the offending cesspools, the 26. We didn't go and say, we're gonna try to target the 83,000 cesspools. The key was to try to prioritize the cesspools, that has the most impact, to our nearshore waters.
So I understand that, but so there's absolutely no way, I cannot believe that we don't have smart enough scientists at UH who could further break down priority level 1 and priority level 2 to give us really, because it would also help you. You would want to grant exemptions to the ones who are not able to who, one, are not as most offensive, and two, who may not be able to afford it. You would want to give those people the exemption and go after the people who are in level 1A versus level 1B.
Yeah.
Is there any way that, maybe this is not a question for you, but maybe a question for the scientists at UH?
We actually work with them, but the issue is the funding, and there needs to be actually, because I'm talking about Suffolk, New York, as well as Florida. They've invested millions of dollars. I'm not saying 1 million or 2 million, millions of dollars in the upgrades. Okay, and I think there has to be more effort from our state, county, to actually put more money and invest in this infrastructure, because what we're going to keep on doing is we're going to keep on delaying the upgrades, and by the time you realize it's where the impacts are really bad, it's going to be too late to reverse it. So instead of saying, well, we keep on delaying it, there has to be funding found to help with these upgrades.
I'm there with you, and if we could make sure that the city and county of Honolulu add some of the real property tax they're getting from new properties, I think we could also ensure that there's funding. But I think, again, can you answer the question, or maybe the scientist on is there any other best available science that we can look to that might give us better ways to prioritize level 1 or level 2?
Yeah, that's something that probably, because the tool that we did, the prioritization tool, it is actually a living tool, where, so, that's something we can go back, and I can go back with the University of Hawaii, to look at, how can we look at the, the prioritization, to see if there's something we can do about that.
I think we saw someone from the University of Hawaii on Zoom. If you could please address Representative Bellatti's question, if you're still there.
Thank you, Sina.
Chris Scholler.
Chris?
Okay, he left, it seems. Actually, I do have a question for the Office of Hawaiian Affairs if you're still on. Are they there? Zuriaki? No.
Zuri is not present.
Okay, never mind. Representative Lowen.
Thank you. Sina, sorry. You're doing a great job. I just wanted to clarify, because there was the question about whether advisories had been issued. But we do, I sign up for the alert, so I see it practically daily where there's a brown water advisory here or there or wherever. Those brown water advisories come from non-point source pollution generally, and even the other gentleman who pointed out that when there's a big storm event, that's when all the nitrate ends up on the reef. But of course, those are linked. So, when we have a brown water advisory, is that pollution including discharge from wastewater systems?
Yeah, it most likely is, from cesspools, but to quantify it, we can't really quantify the amount that is actually in that water. So,
and then we've had bills actually several sessions in a row about doing more testing during brown water advisories so that we could actually get data to back that up. And I think the position of Department of Health which is not your direct division, but has kind of been, well, we already know the water's dirty, we're putting out the advisory, we don't have the capacity to go do the additional testing.
Yeah, and that's true.
Yeah.
Because it is, if they were to take samplings, it would actually exceed the, their MPDS or the water quality standards.
And then just to clarify, and I don't know the answer, but you would have to do rulemaking to effectuate this. And yes, it would technically be, and it would not more than technically, it would be enforceable. That's the whole point. So no one's trying to pretend it's not enforceable. But does DOA, I wouldn't understand it. I would think that there would be some system of fines or fees or whatever you currently do for people who are non-compliant. not, do you have a legal authority to put a lien on a property?
We actually do, but then for the 29 years that I've been there, we've never put a lien on any property.
Okay.
Only because we want to actually work, with the, property owner, to comply.
Okay. Okay, that's interesting. I didn't realize that. All right, I know we have a lot of other bills to get to, so.
Thank you. Members, are there any further questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll be moving on to SB 599, SD1, HD1. This is relating to health. First to testify on this measure, we have Alani Kioki, Licensing Administrator from DCCA Professional and Vocational Licensing Division in support.
The division will stand on its written testimony in support.
Thank you. Next, we have Chelsea Fukunaga, Executive Officer of the Board of Nursing in support.
The board will stand on its written testimony.
Thank you. Next, we have Ms. Kioki, are you also testifying for the Hawaii Medical Board?
I am.
Okay, please go ahead.
The board will stand on its written testimony in support.
Thank you. Next, we have Jonathan Ching, Kaiser Permanente in support.
Chair, Vice Chair, and everybody.
Thank you. Are there any other persons here to testify on this measure? Seeing none, members, we have written testimony in support from the Hawaii Academy of Physician Assistants, Hawaii Society for Respiratory Care, Hawaii Pacific Health, Hawaii Association of Professional Nurses, Hawaii Public Health Association, and the Hawaii State Center of Nursing. Members, are there questions? Seeing none, we'll be moving on to SB 693, SD1, HD1 relating to pharmacists. First to testify on this measure, we have Gordon Ito, Insurance Commissioner from DCCA, with comments.
Chair, Vice Chair, members, Ian Robertson for the Insurance Commissioner. We stand on a written testimony.
Thank you. Next, we have James Schwetzky, Executive Officer from the Board of Pharmacy, in support.
Aloha, Chair and Committee. I'm James Kizuski, Executive Officer for the Board of Pharmacy. We will stand on our written testimony, but the Board would like to highlight that APRNs were afforded the ability to become sole providers in 2009 with via Act 169, and pharmacists in this current state of a healthcare crisis ask that they be afforded the same luxury. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Don Kurisu. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, we have Don Kurisu from Hawaii Medical Services Association with comments.
Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, we stand on a testimony offering comments.
Thank you. Next, we have Paula Akrina, Aloha Care, with comments.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members. We'll stand on our written comments.
Thank you. Next, we have Corey Sanders, from the Hawaii Pharmacists Association, in support on Zoom.
Good afternoon, Chair Nakashima, Vice Chair Sayama, and members of the committee. I'm Corey Sanders. I'm president of the Hawaii Pharmacists Association. I want to stand on our testimony and strong support, but I do want to emphasize a few points for the committee and clearly articulate that HPHA is advocating that we move this bill forward without an audit, given the current state of healthcare in Hawaii. Like James just said from the Board of Pharmacy, in 2009, APRNs were given this exact same luxury given the healthcare needs of the state at the time. And in 2023, the provider shortage is exponentially worse than that of 2009, and access to care issues continue to span across all islands. We're seeking to follow this precedent. We also have concerns that the audit of this magnitude, currently written as a social and fiscal audit, would be extremely complex given that the ask is not black and white. It remains unclear how the Office of the Auditor would properly quantify the return on investment of a pharmacist when added to a care team. It would be hard to project outcomes such as hospitalization rates, emergency department visits, increased medication adherence, and other long-term benefits integrated with pharmacist care. I've also spoken with the Office of the Auditor last week, and we're worried about how long this audit would take given the complexity of the audit, and we're worried that it would take multiple years, which would just continue to delay care that pharmacists are already willing and able to provide. We predict any delay would ultimately stop the movement for mandated payment from going into statute at all, or potentially result in a disjointed implementation process over the coming years. If all payers are not mandated to move forward together, this initiative will become confusing to pharmacists, patients, and providers across the board. Again, we're only seeking reimbursement for services that are already within a pharmacist's scope of practice in Hawaii law. Lastly, based off previous discussion and testimonies, all insurers are pro-pharmacist integrated care. The question is not when, but how we do this. And passing this bill as it stands is the only way to ensure that we move forward together. We're willing to delay implementation to allow the proper time for insurers to build out the necessary internal billing structures. The last point I want to make, I know I'm right at 2 minutes. I just want to share the sentiment. This keeps coming to my head when I think about the healthcare of the state in general, is that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Let us make changes now to move forward together without any additional delay in order to provide our community with real solutions to the current healthcare crisis. Thank you, and I will be available for questions.
Thank you. And next we have Chad Kawakami, individual in support.
Hi, good afternoon. Honorable Chair Nakashima, Vice Chair Sayama, members of the Consumer Protection Committee. My name is Chad Kawakami, and I've been a practicing pharmacist for 20 years. Let me tell you a brief story. Today is a special snack day. Every Tuesday since she was in kindergarten, Emma would go with her grandma to McDonald's to have French fries and share in some memories. Emma looks forward to snack day every Tuesday, but today is a little different. Today, grandma is not there to pick her up. She can't because she was dizzy. She fell around lunchtime, and now she's at the hospital with a broken hip, and her doctors think that medications may be part of the cause. Pharmacists are the drug experts. We are trained to work with physicians and prescribers, ensuring medications are effective and do no harm. We are eager to work with providers within our communities, allowing everybody to practice at the top of their license. Together, we can increase access to medical care statewide. The College of Pharmacy graduates pharmacy leaders who provide care in local communities. Our graduates improve the quality of life and bridge care gaps where there aren't enough providers. Unfortunately, we cannot expand our services to vulnerable kupuna, many who live in rural and medically underserved communities, because pharmacists do not have a reimbursement mechanism. Our students are trained, but many leave Hawaii because of the lack of jobs. This bill is the most consequential bill for our profession that I've seen in my 20-plus year career. Senate Bill 693 would provide us that very mechanism that we require for licensed pharmacists so we can continue to transform healthcare in Hawaii. This bill ensures pharmacists will continue to care for kupuna like Emma's grandmother by reviewing and stopping harmful medications. Emma looks forward to creating many more memories with her grandma on snack days. Thank you very much for allowing me to testify in support of this bill.
Thank you. Next, we have Lily Van, individual in support on Zoom.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Lily Van, and I am in support of this measure. I did want to provide a few verbal comments in addition to my written testimony. I am a product of this state. I was born and raised here. I graduated high school here. And then I went on to college and grad school in the mainland. But I always told myself that I was going to come home to the community that raised me. Immediately following my residency training, I was fortunate to work in Washington for some time. That was an amazing experience. Those in my profession who worked in a state like Washington will attest to how rewarding it is to be able to work in a state where you can be reimbursed for cognitive services. And for me, this isn't about billing for a patient's appointment. It really is about access to care. I did get an offer to come home and work for one of our healthcare systems here in Hawaii, and it was honestly probably one of the hardest professional decisions I've had to make. It was a hospital I was born and raised in, one that I volunteered at as a high school student. When my mom was sick, this was my safe space, and so when I thought about where I wanted to work at home, I always knew I wanted to come home to the place that's given me so much. But the hard thing for me was that knowing that I'm coming home, I knew that I was going to take a giant step backward in my profession. Here in Hawaii, pharmacists aren't recognized as reimbursable providers. So the financial implication of this means that I'm not going to be supported on a team based on numbers alone. At the end of the day, I did decide to leave Washington and my team of 20 clinical pharmacists to work on a team of 2. This was a huge step backward for me. It took me almost 4 months to accept my job offer. And I honestly only did it because of my mom. It didn't make financial sense. But I did it because I was lucky enough to have that family support to be able to make that decision. But I really do think that there are many young PharmD colleagues that are not as lucky and will probably struggle with the same decision on whether or not to come home and be able to serve our community that did so much for us. I strongly think that pharmacists deserve to be compensated just like any other healthcare professional, and I hope that you take into consideration this back during deliberation today. So thank you so much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Are there any other persons here to testify on this measure? Okay, seeing none, Members, are there any questions?
Chair, on Zoom, we have Dana as well.
I understand there's someone on Zoom who wishes to testify on this measure. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Dana Wong Otis, and I'm a pharmacist from Hawaii Island. I want to thank you for the opportunity to provide comments today on Senate Bill 693. As a pharmacist practicing in the community, I have met with many patients in a variety of settings, whether it be at the pharmacy, at teaching education classes, or even meeting with patients in the primary care provider's office. The goal is always to help patients understand their medications and work towards their health goals. Pharmacists are one of the most accessible healthcare professionals, and patients love that they have access to a pharmacist on their team. They will oftentimes open up to us about certain concerns, and they really trust that relationship that they have with the pharmacist. From my experience, there is always at least one thing that we discover or something new when we meet with patients. And, unfortunately, without direct reimbursement, we don't see these types of pharmacist-patient interactions as often as it should. So I believe that this bill is very important to our profession, and it will greatly increase access to quality care in our community. I thank you for the opportunity to provide comments on this bill.
Thank you. Are there any other persons on Zoom wishing to testify on this measure? Okay, please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Ken Oka. On behalf of Maikai Health, we stand in strong support of this bill. Maikai Health is a nonprofit community clinic that was created in response to the provider shortage and a lot of other healthcare woes that we experience in East Hawaii. Hawaii County alone is recognized as one of the third worst provider shortage area in the nation. And actually, since starting Maikai Health, we've seen more providers close shop and move to the mainland oftentimes. Over 35,000 East Hawaii residents are without a primary care provider, and many of them show up in urgent care, oftentimes ER. Pharmacists have a valuable skill set that should be leveraged through appropriate reimbursement to not only alleviate this healthcare crisis, but maintain positive health outcomes in our state. Similar to APRNs, by allowing pharmacists to operate at the top of their licenses, we can better maintain the health and the health of our island communities. Again, thank you. Maikai Health stands in strong support of this bill, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Are there any other persons testifying on Zoom? Okay, seeing none. Members, are there questions? Actually, I do have a question for the Board of Pharmacy. Are they here? Okay, if not, DCCA?
I'm here, Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Thank you. So in your written testimony, you did mention the exemption that was referenced by Ms. Sanders from the Hawaii Pharmacists Association regarding the APRNs and the audit. Can you provide a little bit more context as to why there was that exemption provided in 2009?
I can go ahead and look into that. All I know is with looking back on the law back in 2009 that they didn't, what I was really looking at if an audit was required. Corey may be able to expound a little bit more on that topic.
Thank you. I will refer to Ms. Sanders. Ms. Sanders, would you be able to provide a little bit more context with regards to that exemption?
Sure. The way that the exemption was written into the bill was because of the current state of the healthcare crisis in 2009. So it didn't give any data as to how many providers there were or how many areas of need there were, but it was just because of the current state of crisis at that time.
Okay. Was there some kind of quantifiable data, I guess, providing rationale for that crisis?
No, there wasn't that I saw in the bill, but I'll go check right now and send that over to you.
Thank you.
Sure.
While you take a look at that, do you know who made that determination as to if there was a crisis or not? Okay, no.
No, I don't.
Thank you. I guess no one from the auditor's office is here, so I guess I don't have any further questions, but yes, I appreciate any further information you could provide me on that, Ms. Sanders, with regards
Vice
to
Chair?
that exemption.
Can I have a question?
Representative Belatti?
Is there anyone from the insurance division?
Yes.
So the sunrise analysis is a pretty standard requirement, and I think that the APRN was a different situation than what's here. So when we did an audit for ABA services for autism, we appropriated monies for an audit. Do you recall what that amount is, and then what are our options if the auditor's office cannot do this kind of study in order to get and contract an audit?
I don't know what amount was appropriated for that. I think that may have been before I joined the insurance division.
Okay, I would imagine that it was actually pretty affordable, and I think that if you can provide information to this committee about that sunrise audit and analysis that was done, because that might
Sure.
help jumpstart this process, because we certainly don't want to avoid doing a sunrise analysis when that is what's required by the law. And I think it would be helpful to look at that model and maybe confer with Commissioner Ito as to what our options would be to be able to appropriate monies for a study.
Okay.
And that was a kind of study that was done that I don't believe the auditor's office had the ability because of the complexity of the healthcare issues, and so this might be another one that would be subject to that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, members.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions, members?
I have one more comment based on the appropriations for the audit. In the APRN bill back in 2009, so there wasn't a sunrise analysis done, but instead the insurance commissioner did a report on the implications of adding APRNs to providers 2 years after the bill was passed. So I don't know if that was a compromise in some way, shape, or form, but I can look into that too and send it over to the committee.
Thank you. Okay, members, no further questions. We'll be moving on then to SB 674 SD1 HD1 relating to Interstate Medical Licensure Compact. First to testify on this measure, we have Esther Brown, Complaints Enforcement Office from the Regulated Industries Complaints Office with comments.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair. Rico will stand on its written testimony offering comments.
Thank you. Next we have Alani Kyoki from the Executive Officer of the Hawaii Medical Board in support.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Alani Kyoki. I'm the Executive Officer of the Hawaii Medical Board as well as the Licensing Administrator for the division. The division and the board stand in strong support of this measure. We do want to note that the additional language included on page 25, lines 6 to 17 regarding the immunity provisions is not a material deviation from the compact language. That was a question posed in the last committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Jace Mikulanic, thank you, from the Queens Health System in support.
Thanks, Vice Chair. I appreciate you hearing this bill. Queens stands in very strong support of this measure. Appreciate you hearing this measure. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Paula Arcina from Aloha Care in support. Thank you. Next we have Judith Akin from the National Organization for Rare Disorders in support.
Aloha Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I'm Judy Aiken. I'm a member of the National Organization of Rare Disorders Advocacy Task Force. I am here to support Bill SB 674, the Interstate Medical License Compact. In 2019, I was diagnosed with IgA nephropathy, which is a rare autoimmune disease that attacks the kidneys. Basically, what happens is my hemoglobin A gets confused, and it goes after the kidneys, causing it to inflame and disrupting my filtration systems. Now, at diagnosis, I had very little access to information and specialists that focused on IgA nephropathy. Here in the islands, it was not readily available. I have an excellent nephrologist, but his patient load is high, and he only has a handful of IgA nephropathy patients. Therefore, his focus was not on my disease. I was left independently to research and gather information on new treatments and clinical trials. Even when I found a clinical trial, I was unable to participate as there was no doctors here in the islands that could oversee the treatment. I was left really frustrated and feeling very isolated. So with support and passing of the Interstate Medical License Compact, I could have access to specialists and participate in clinical trials that could potentially change the outcome. Living in the Hawaiian Islands, we can be very challenging with anyone with a rare disease. It becomes a life of picking and choosing. We are limited in so many ways by distance. This bill will allow patients to make decisions about their health care without worrying about their bank accounts. In addition, we can eliminate unnecessary and risky travel to the continent to seek specialists. This bill would save patients money, time, and peace of mind, resulting in a healthier population. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Hilton Rathel from the Healthcare Association of Hawaii in support.
Aloha Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, Robert Choi on behalf of HH, who stand on their testimony and strong support. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Don Kurisu with the Hawaii Medical Service Association in support. Thank you. Next, we have Evan Owe from the Hawaii Association for Justice with comments.
Aloha Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, Evan Oe on behalf of the Hawaii Association for Justice. We stand on our written comments, and we just wanted to express our appreciation to the previous committee chair for her amendments to add the liability in there. So appreciate that, and available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other persons here to testify on this measure? Seeing none, members, we have written testimony and support from the Hawaii Primary Care Association, HPMA, HPH, Grassroots Institute of Hawaii with comments, Hawaii Association for Health Plans and support, Hawaii Medical Association in support. Members, are there any questions? Seeing none, we'll be moving on to SB 962 SD1 HD1 relating to medical cannabis. First to testify on this measure, we have Kenneth Fink, Director for the Department of Health, with comments.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Liam Dimmock from Office of Medical Cannabis Control and Regulation. We stand on our written testimony and are available for questions.
Thank you. Next, we have Eugene Tien from DBED with comments. Thank you. Next, we have Clifton Otto from Akamai Cannabis Consulting with comments on Zoom.
Not present.
Not present? Okay, we'll be moving on. We have Jason Hanley from Care Waialua in opposition. In person? Oh. Aloha.
Okay. Thank you, legislators, for listening to me talk. My name is Jason Hanley. I'm the owner of Care Waialua, the largest patient-based farm in Hawaii. We were established in 2015 to provide a safe and secure place for patients to grow. This was our goal. Today we are fighting for our rights as medical patients. Rumors of our farm of diversion and unregulated products are exactly that. They're rumors. Our farm is healthier and safer in many more ways than dispensaries, and we can prove this. We are now looking at a bill, SB 962, which is originally a dispensary maintenance bill, but has been turned into a medical cannabis regulatory bill, which many of us medical patients were not following for obvious reasons. We have provided a lot of our time and testimony into HB 1217, which will be being heard tomorrow on the original medical patient bill being heard by the Senate. This bill is similar to HB 17. It wants to limit the rights of medical patients to only 20 cards per site, allow DOH to establish exemptions on case-by-case basis, to go over the 20 card threshold, and allow open-ended enforcement of medical farms. We provided a lot of I hope constructive amendments on this bill. What we do want to see in this bill, we do oppose it, and we do believe it should be deferred and extend the sunshine date so we can all come together, dispensaries, growers, legislators, and have a review of the medical program to really put forth thoughtful laws on whether we're going to limit sites or we're going to regulate sites and give them a canopy size. That's basically what we're asking for, is just a thoughtful group of people to come together. I recently allowed 4 DOH inspectors on our site last Monday to give them a better understanding on how to move forward with the medical program and allow medical farms to operate along with dispensaries. I basically explained to them that flower and canopy limits is the answer, not plant counts or patient counts. And then I'll just end with, patients should have a choice to choose their grow site and not be forced to dispensaries. We're We're all trying to figure this out and make it all work. I will repeat this over and over again. Maine has the best medical program in the nation. Why does our state want to reinvent the wheel or pick from states like Oregon, California, others that have completely failed?
My apologies, Mr. Hanley.
No,
The
no
2
problem.
minutes
And
is
now
up.
have
Can you
the
please
largest-
summarize?
And now have the largest black markets in the world. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you very much. Aloha.
Thank you. Next, we have Shanghai Government Strategies for Cure Oahu and support on Zoom.
Oh, I'm here.
Oh, hi.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Mihoko Ito on behalf of Cure Oahu. We'll stand on our testimony and support. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Miley Cannabis Clinic in opposition. Are they here in person?
She couldn't make it.
Oh, okay. Thank you. And we'll be moving on then to Wendy Gibson, individual with comments on Zoom. Not present. Okay. Are there any other persons here to testify on this measure? Please go ahead, gentleman in front.
Hi, aloha, Chair.
Thank you.
Vice Chair, and committee members.
Sorry, for the record, can you please state your name?
My name is Dennis Bumpy Kanahele.
Thank you.
I'm in total support of my brother over here, Jason Hanley, who's been working hard to try to figure out things like he said. I'm in opposition to this bill. Hopefully we can get the language to protect our Native Hawaiian community, veterans, and community as a whole, who are part of our medical program. I'm a acupuncturist. I do digital acupuncture. I've done it for over 20 years, and I've been using bioenergy, the latest technology in bioenergy. So about 2005, 2006, I started to use cannabis in my practice. And then it led to all the things that we had to struggle through and get to this point. So I really worried that it's going to just focus on business and not have us, the community in general, and especially the Native Hawaiian community has not spoken out on this. And we'll come together now. We're going to be part of Kia Wailua. I have 100 patients that coming over. From our village that we used to have a grow there. We stopped because of Jason's his expertise, the quality of medication, and a whole bunch of other things that is unseen. A lot of work going into that place. So I support him. I'm against and in opposition to this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Gentleman in the back, please.
Aloha mai kako. O Afrika wana madera so ko inoa. No waianai mai au. Mahalo for the time. I'm in full opposition of this bill because it feels like it was put together on a speedy rush to implement that they're here to support the patients, the medical patients. But that's just one part of the whole bill. The rest of the bill is all distorted. It's not made for patients. It's made for dispensaries to make more money and monopolize the cannabis scene in Hawaii. It feels like we're going back 15 years to when we were fighting for medical cannabis patients' rights. Because what's happening of lately is a whole monopoly where the dispensary dictates how the patients are going to get their medicine and whether or not farmers can actually grow medicine. That's the whole thing. It's always putting us against the dispensary. I'm a farmer, but besides a farmer, I'm a kanakamola, I'm a Native Hawaiian, and I'm a la'au, la'apa'au practitioner. So we deal with plants. I can guarantee that maybe 10% of the people that work in the dispensaries know anything about plants because I actually support them. I've been to every single dispensary over here on Oahu, up in Maui, in Kauai, and on Moko Keawe on the Big Island. And the whole sad thing is, it is very overpriced. The quality of the medicine is not there, and people aren't able to get it at the times that they need to be. Now, I like the whole beginning of the bill where it said that they're going to give patients a little, walking in, they're going to show you the place, a little sit down there. That's great, but you open up at 10 o'clock in the morning, you shut down at 7 p.m. Many of our kupuna are up and early at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. They don't want to go to any place that's going to be traffic ridden 10 to 7 o'clock. So it doesn't really cater to the patients. It really caters to the dispensaries. I actually have a list of many politicians who've been taking money through the campaign endorsements from all these dispensaries, but we'll save that for tomorrow's meeting, where I'm going to have a big list for you guys, definitely. So, my thing against this bill is total opposition. You guys need to go back to the drawing board, or you guys need to go to the farmers and go to the patients and see what's really happening. Because all you guys see is the money, and the money is not what we do it for. We do this for the medicine plant to heal the people, to give them an option, an organic, natural option.
My apologies.
To be
the
healthy.
2 minutes is up. Can you please summarize your testimony?
I'm in full opposition, and I'll be in opposition tomorrow.
Thank
and I
you.
hope you guys are ready, because we get 300-something people that should be showing up tomorrow. So mahalo for you guys' time. And me and farmers, we and Jason, we don't always see eye to eye, but we have a common ground. Patients come first. The cannabis, the plant, the medicine is made for patients, not for money, not for monetary consumption.
Okay, thank you.
Because we do this for free, because it's in our pu'uvai. This is in our livelihood. We come from legacies of people who grow cannabis to provide medicine for the people. Okay? So
Thank you.
mahalo.
Thank you. Are there any other persons here to testify on this measure? Oh, yes, please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Maddie Meheula, and I'm here to stand in opposition to SB 962. Specifically, I really only oppose the part that was recently amended in the Health Committee regarding patient site limits. It doesn't feel really germane to this bill. It doesn't really feel like it belongs here, because I believe the initial intent of this bill was for signage and advertising, product labeling, so I'm not sure how this can relate. And there's a House bill, HB 1217, headed through the Senate right now, that is basically the exact wording of what is listed in 962 as amended by the Health Committee. I just want to say a few things. We're medical patients here. We don't have the money to contribute to campaign finances. We don't have the money to send people to meet with politicians all the time. So we have to stand here in opposition to measures like this, because it is eroding the rights of legacy caregivers who've provided safe medicine for the island since the year 2000, since the original cannabis law was put in place. That's really all I'd like to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any other persons here to testify on this measure? Any other persons on Zoom to testify? Okay, seeing none. Members, are there any questions? Okay, seeing none. We'll be moving on then to SB 764 SD1 HD1 relating to affordable housing. First to testify on this measure, we have Nadine Andel, Director for DCCA, in support.
Aloha. My name is Iris Ikeda. I am the Commissioner for the Division of Financial Institution for Director Ando on behalf of DCCA. So we're standing on our testimony to support this bill, and we had proposed a couple of amendments after we submitted our testimony that we would like you folks to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Joshua Wish from Holomua Collaborative in support. Okay, he's gone. We'll be moving on then to Catherine Camp from Central Pacific Bank in support.
Aloha, Catherine Camp from Central Pacific Bank. I'm testifying, and we stand on our testimony in strong support.
Thank you. Next, we have Myung Oh from Hunt Development Group, LLC, and Hunt Capital Partners, LLC, in support.
Good afternoon, Chair Nakashima, Vice Chair Sayama. We stand on our written testimony in support. We just want to echo that we support any and all action that will increase the availability for local banks to invest in low-income housing tax credit. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Betty Lowe Larson from Catholic Charities Hawaii in support. On Zoom. Okay, we'll be moving on to Sanhai Government Strategies, representing Hawaii Bankers Association in support.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Mihoko Ito on behalf of the Hawaii Bankers testimony and support.
Thank you. Are there any other persons here to testify on this measure? Please go ahead.
Mahalo, Vice Chair Evan Oy on behalf of NIOP Hawaii. Apologies, there appears to be some mix-up on our testimony, but we wanted to stand on our support for this measure as it'll have beneficial impact for affordable housing, especially LIHTC projects, and in a time where we need housing units, this is essential. So thank you for the time available for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any other persons here to testify on this measure? Okay, seeing none, members, we have supportive testimony from HPM Building Supply, Chamber of Commerce Hawaii, Hawaiian Host Group, JN Group, Title Guarantee of Hawaii, Maui Chamber of Commerce, and an individual. Members, are there any questions? Seeing none, we'll be moving on to SB 729, SD1, HD1, relating to board members. First to testify, first to testify on this measure, we have Kendon Kleinhans, chairperson for the Real Estate Commission, in opposition.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, committee members. Keaton Kleinhans, a condominium specialist on behalf of the Hawaii Real Estate Commission. You have the Commission's written testimony in opposition to this measure. The auditor has yet to conduct the statutory sunrise review of, as required by HRS Section 26H6. We would note that while sunrise reviews primarily serve as cost-benefit analyses for any regulations being considered, a review of these regulations could serve as an opportunity to identify whether any safeguards are necessary to limit any unintended consequences and really ensure the success of mandatory board education. Thank you, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you. Next, we have Jane Sugimura from the Hawaii Council of Association of Apartment Owners in support.
Good afternoon, Chair Nakashima, Vice Chair Sayama, members of the committee. Hawaii Council supports supports in the purpose and intent of this bill. You have my testimony with minor changes. I do want to bring to your attention that I have been contacted by people in the industry and with concerns that they've raised, and I have to agree with them that there are concerns about exposure to board members if this bill were to pass out in the format it is now. I suggest that, I still think that it needs to pass out, that it needs to go to the Real Estate Commission to develop a curriculum for board training. But I think at the same time, when they have these hearings to determine curriculum, let the Real Estate Commission hear from the stakeholders as to whether or not that education will be mandatory, voluntary, and let them come back to the legislature next year with some recommendations as to how to implement the training and training program. There is, there is concern that if the bill passes in this form now, that board members will be exposed to liability, to lawsuits, and they may be discouraged from volunteering. And so I think it would be prudent to allow this bill to pass out and amend it to let the Real Estate Commission deal with the industry, the stakeholders, and come back next year and make recommendations as to how this bill should be enacted in its final form. And you have time, because the first deadline under the bill as written is July 1, 2024, which is next year. So there is time, and I think that this bill needs to go out, I recommend that it go out to the Real Estate Commission to meet with the stakeholders, to meet with the industry people, to find, to develop the curriculum and determine how to implement this program that's going to benefit, the condominium community, and to minimize the exposure to the volunteer board members who serve their associations.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for allowing me to testify, and I'll be available for questions.
Thank you. Next, we have Lila Mauer from Hui Oiaio in support on Zoom.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I'm Lila Mower in support of SB 729 SD1 HD1 and add these comments to my written testimony. A review of condo education trust funds subsidized mediations, as documented in the Hawaii Condo Bulletin during the period from March 2016 to December 2022, revealed that nearly 4 out of every 5 mediation cases were originated by owners against their associations. Owners report that the boards are often ignorant of their association's governing rules and laws and fail to properly plan for necessary repairs and renovation, which then leads to sudden and unwieldy assessments and or increases in association fees. I personally know of directors, many of whom served multiple terms on their boards, who had never read their association governing documents and were unaware of or had never looked at Hawaii Revised Statutes 514A or B, or Administrative Rules Title 16, which are critical to condo governance. Please pass this measure. It will not end malfeasance, but directors will have no excuse to ignore laws, ignore the limits of their authority, and the extent of their responsibilities. Mahalo for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Next, we have Steve Glanstein from the Hawaii State Association of Parliamentarians in opposition on Zoom.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, committee members. My name is Steve Glanstein. I was fortunate to be able to make the meeting. Had a couple association meetings this morning. I stand on my written testimony with a few comments. Jane Sugimura's remarks are very compelling, and I would suggest that you are determined to pass this bill, consider amending it as a directive to the Real Estate Commission to come up with some recommendations, perhaps expanded classes. You always hate to go in opposition to education. However, if you come in and you use a sledgehammer and you bang it against the tile floor, you might kill the roach, but you're sure going to do a terrible thing to the floor. And our problem from doing well over 100 meetings a year has been finding board members to step up who are willing to serve. And many of them do read the documents. Many of them look kind of glazed over when they have large number of documents. So I think, though, as an alternative to defeating the bill, if you wish to have some form of bill come out that would be much more palatable to the condominium community, I think directing the Real Estate Commission to provide us a little bit of assistance and maybe be more proactive on education would be a much more of a middle ground. And I'm ready for any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have R. Laurie McGuire, CAILAC Hawaii Chapter in opposition on Zoom.
Yes, good morning, Chair, or rather afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Laurie McGuire, and I'm testifying in opposition on behalf of CAILAC. I do stand on my testimony. However, I am available for any questions should you have any. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Jeff Sedino, individual in support on Zoom.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Jeff Sedino, and I support this bill because it will improve the governance and harmony of condominiums. It is cliche, but with power comes responsibility. Unfortunately, many board members have a very adolescent relationship to their responsibilities. As just one example, some of my board members think that as an owner, I am not allowed to view or participate in board meetings. That is like saying the public is not allowed to observe legislative hearings. This is condo governance 101, and many board members are ignorant of even the basics. While a trivial example, I can promise you that it is only indicative of much more serious problems that have been created because of their ignorance of basic governance principles. Please pass this bill so that owners stop paying the price of ignorant board members, and so condo governance and harmony can be improved. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony.
Thank you. Next, we have Paul Ireland Koftanau, individual in opposition on Zoom.
Good afternoon, Chair Nakashima, Vice Chair Sayama, and members of the committee. My name is Paul Ireland Koftanau, and I'm a condominium unit owner. I'm also an attorney who practices condominium association law in Hawaii, and I've been in this field for over 10 years. During this time, I myself have been a regular presenter at numerous seminars, including DCCA's Condorama and other seminars held by the CAI Hawaii chapter and HCCA. I've also co-authored articles for local publications as well as amicus briefs reviewed by the Hawaii Supreme Court in matters pertaining to condominium law. And assisting with educational goals of condominium unit owners, board members, and property managers is something that I'm passionate about and I support. However, this bill as drafted will do more harm than good. Simply, I oppose this bill because it will create problems for even the most well-managed associations in our state, and the penalty in this measure, which serves to disqualify board members who serve in a voluntary capacity, will lead to significant confusion, administrative burdens, and litigation. So for these reasons, this measure should be deferred. Otherwise, what Jane has said is very interesting, and I agree that this measure, if it does pass, it should be amended to remove the penalties and mandates on board members and instead direct the Real Estate Commission to develop a curriculum with input from stakeholders and that the Real Estate Commission report back to the legislature next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Greg Misakian, individual in support on Zoom.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Greg Misakian. I stand on my written testimony and stress the urgency why better consumer protection laws for condominium owners are needed now. I would also like to share with you something very relevant to the discussion. Yesterday was my association's annual meeting and election, and an owner who advocated, as I do, for fair and honest governance and compliance with fiduciary duty and the rule of law, sadly passed away in the morning as I was preparing for the meeting. He had lived on the property as a young boy in a single-family home that would later become our AOAO and his new home. Together, we did our best to inform the owners of improper actions by our board and management company, which were negatively impacting all owners financially and in many other ways. A condominium association, just like any corporation or business, must have qualified and responsible leadership. The current model of governance for associations does not properly address this, and many directors do not possess the knowledge or the training they require to properly carry out their duties. I was elected to my association board last night by an overwhelming show of support in the percentage of votes I received. As a board member who currently sits on 3 boards, I am fully aware of my fiduciary duty and duty of care to those that these boards serve. I ask the committee and all legislators to please support SB 729 SD1 HD1, and please support HB 178 and HB 1501 in 2024, as an ombudsman is urgently needed to provide oversight and dispute resolution for condominium associations and HOAs. Mahalo for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Are there any other persons here to testify on this measure? Okay, seeing none, members, are there any questions? Seeing none, we'll be moving on to SB 393, SD1 HD1 relating to landlord-tenant code. First to testify on this measure, we have Lindsay Garcia from Hawaii Realtors with comments.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Lindsay Garcia from the Hawaii Association of Realtors. So we appreciate the intent of this measure, and especially the emergency rental relief portion to assist tenants that are struggling to make their rental agreements. This mediation pilot applies to all tenants who are unable to pay their rent. Therefore, we believe that the rental relief program should apply to all tenants who participate, not just those under 80% AMI as is currently written in the bill. We are also supportive of the sunset date in order to be able to evaluate the impact of this pilot. It is very important to measure the results of this pilot to ensure that not only are agreements made, but also that the agreements were followed through with by both parties. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Nicholas Severson from Legal Aid Society of Hawaii in support.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Nick Severson, Managing Attorney of the Housing and Consumer Unit at the Legal Aid Society of Hawaii. We stand in support and stand on our written testimony that we previously submitted, but are happy to answer any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Betty Lowe Larson from Catholic Charities Hawaii in support on Zoom.
Not present.
Okay, we'll be moving on then. Are there any other persons here to testify on this measure? Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chair Nakashima, Vice Chair Sayama, members of the committee. My name is Gavin Thornton from Hawaii Appleseed. Apologies, I blew it somehow on submitting my testimony. I tried to submit, figured out that I hadn't. So thanks for this opportunity to talk. I want to emphasize just a couple things. One, the win-win nature of this bill. I think you've heard from landlord folks that this is helpful. From the tenant side, it's also helpful. So I think really, really important. And two, I actually agree with the Hawaii Association of Realtors testimony on the income limits. From Hawaii Appleseed's perspective, we want to see this go to low-income folks, the folks most in need of the relief. But we also want to avoid the bureaucratic nightmares that resulted from income limits like this in the pandemic rent relief programs, which just caused problems, producing the documentation, slowed down the process. It made it much more difficult to actually get the funding to the people that needed it. It's our perspective that the folks that are on the cusp of eviction are the only folks that are going to be able to access this because they're in mediation. Those are the folks that are in need, and most of those folks are going to be low-income families that are really struggling to make ends meet. They haven't been able to do it. That's why they're right next to getting evicted. So we'd also request that the income limitation be removed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other persons here to testify on this measure? Okay, seeing none, members will be taking a short recess for decision making. Recess.
Hello, reconvening the Committee on Consumer Protection and Commerce, Tuesday, March 21st, for decision-making. Senate Bill 504, Senate Draft 1, House Draft 1 relating to environmental protection. Chair would like to incorporate the recommendations from several groups to preface the use of PFAs to intentionally added PFAs. Have a transition period before the requirement takes effect for 2 years to 2025. And that would be it. Members, questions or comments? Chair? Yes, Representative Onishi.
Yeah, I appreciate your amendments, but I still have some major concerns. First of all, intentionally added, is it the manufacturing? Is it the product itself? There are, I guess, concerns that this would eliminate the availability of products in Hawaii. And, we are only a population of less than 1.5 million people. And, to have these things shipped to Hawaii or have a manufacture goods that meets our Hawaii laws may not be reasonable in the time frame. So with that, at this point, I still have to vote with reservations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, any other questions or comments?
Brief comment, Chair. Thank you for
Yes.
passing this, and just to correct the record, I guess. I don't know. California has passed something similar, so in terms of this penalizing Hawaii specifically, I think that California, as a big market mover, will already be making a lot of these product manufacturers fall in line with their requirement and removing these toxic chemicals from these products. I personally would rather know that there's not chemicals being, in the process of being designated as hazardous waste by the EPA in my makeup or cosmetics. So thank you for passing this.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions or comments?
Yes. The retail merchants of Hawaii shared comments that this could hurt our economy by passing this bill. The Consumer Brands Association also mentioned that this could hurt our economy. The Chamber of Commerce of Hawaii shared the same thing. The Hawaii Food Manufacturers Association shared the same thing. So with hopes that I can improve the economy, I'm voting no.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair as amended.
Voting on SB 504 SD1 HD1, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Chair, Vice Chair, vote aye. Representative Amato?
Aye.
Representative Belatti?
Aye.
Representative Hashem?
Aye.
Representative Hussey Burdick?
Aye.
Representative Gates?
Aye.
Representative Lowen?
Aye.
Representative Onishi?
WR.
Representative Tam?
Aye.
Representative Pierre? Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much, members. Senate Bill 459, Senate Draft 2, House Draft 1, related to hydrogen fueling systems, sub-account. Chair's recommendation is to pass this as is. Members, questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair, unamended.
Voting on SB 459 SD2 HD1, Chair's recommendation is to pass as is. Noting the presence of all members, do any members vote no? Any members voting with reservations?
With reservations.
Or reservations for Representative Amato? Okay, thank you, Chair. Your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much. Senate Bill 428, Senate Draft 1, House Draft 1, related to cesspools. My concern on this is that there was no county testimony, and in speaking to the counties, they are working on something toward this end. and do not need state's encouragement to do so. So recommendation is to defer this measure. Members, questions no questions or comments. Okay, thank you very much. Senate Bill 781, Senate Draft 1, House Draft 1, related to renewable energy. Recommendation is in on page 5, lines 11 to 12, to include duly licensed electrician back into the bill. Members, that is it. Members, any questions or comments?
Chair?
Yeah, Representative Onishi.
Yeah, this issue is really a county issue. The county permit requirements is based on the county's determination. I remember when these solar rooftops requests came into the county initially, there was no requirement for a permit in order to get an installation. It's the county who chose to require additional permitting for the installation of solar systems, especially on residential homes. So, I have a problem with us trying to fix a county-created problem, and the advocates for this are not going to the county where the problems are. And so, with that said, I'm going to be voting no on this.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, as amended, Vice Chair.
Voting on SB 781, SD2, HD1, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments, knowing the presence of all members, and the no vote from Representative Onishi. Any members voting no? Any members voting with reservations? Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much. SB 285, Senate Draft 2, House Draft 1, relating to wastewater systems. Recommendation is to move this with Department of Health amendments. And the other technical amendments need for clarity, consistency, and style. Also, to note that no liens or seizure of properties would be allowed in relation to this act. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, wrong bill. Okay. All right, DOH amendments. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair as amended.
Voting on SB 285, SD2, HD1, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments, noting the presence of all members. Any members voting no? Any members voting with reservations? Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much. Senate Bill 426, Senate Draft 2, House Draft 1, related to cesspools. This is the one where no liens on properties. Change the effective date to 2035 for the Tier 1 items and 2040 for Tier 2 items. And note in the committee report that there are financial implications that finance should consider. Members, any questions or comments?
Chair.
Representative Gates.
I just want to note that I will be supporting this measure. I think the testimony indicates that cesspools are a hazard to our communities and our groundwaters. I know there has been constituents that testified against this measure, but I believe that this is in the best interest of our community to start the process of cesspool conversions. And also in the bill, it indicates that there will be additional support if there are financial constraints that can't be met. And at the end of the day, we have to start somewhere. And that's why I'll be strongly supporting this measure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair as amended.
Voting on SB 426 SD2 HD1, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Noting in the presence of all members, any members voting no. Representative Pierre voting no. Any members voting with reservations? Reservations from Representative Amato. Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much, members. Senate Bill 599, Senate Draft 1, House Draft 1 relating to health. Chair's recommendation is to move this as is. Members, questions or comments? Seeing none, unamended. Vice Chair.
Voting on SB 599 SD1 HD1, Chair's recommendation is to pass as is, noting the presence of all members. Any members voting no. Any members voting with reservations? Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much. Senate Bill 693, Senate Draft 1, House Draft 1 relating to pharmacists. Chair is concerned that a sunrise analysis is required for adding items to the insurance provisions. So I'd like to change this bill into a sunrise study, requesting that the auditor analyze this issue. Members, any questions or comments?
Sure.
Yes, Representative Onishi.
So are we also adding funding for the auditor? In the event that they're unable to move ahead with the audit as soon as possible and allow them to contract the required services?
Yes, I believe this goes to finance next, so we can add financial implications to it. So yes, we will. Members, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair as amended.
Voting on SB 693 SD1 HD1, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments, noting the presence of all members. Any members voting no. Any members voting with reservations? Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you very much. Senate Bill 674, Senate Draft 1, House Draft 1, related to interstate medical licensure compact. Chair's recommendation is that we move this as is. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair as is.
Voting on SB 674 SD1 HD1, Chair's recommendation is to pass as is, knowing the presence of all members. Any members voting no. Any members voting with reservations? Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much. Senate Bill 962, Senate Draft 1, House Draft 1, relating to medical cannabis. Chair's recommendation is that we delete Section 5 and other technical amendments needed for clarity, consistency, and style. Members, any questions or comments?
Comments?
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted.
Baladi.
Thank you. Just because we have a few freshman legislators on this committee, I wanted to address some of the comments in testimony that somehow the amendments we are making are not germane. I think it's important to understand in the legislative process that I have examined as the lead chair the bills that we are moving on medical cannabis, and what we are moving and advancing in this bill is certainly germane to the issue of medical cannabis. The title is appropriate, and there is nothing legally faulty with what we are doing. It is consistent with our policy and practice in this House. There will have been 3 hearings. We are going to conference with this bill. There will continue to be lots of discussion. So no one should be made to feel as if we are doing something such as a gut and replace. This is not a gut and replace. The amendments made in the Health Committee, now considered by the CPC Committee, and hopefully will be considered by the Finance Committee, are all germane to ensuring that the integrity and safety of the medical cannabis program that includes both the licensed dispensaries and the patient registry system is safe and manageable and has the integrity that our public demands. So thank you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair, for advancing this measure.
Thank you very much. Members, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair, as amended.
Voting on SB 962 SD1 HD1, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments, knowing the presence of all members. Any members voting no? Any members voting with reservations?
Reservations.
Reservations for Representative Amato and reservations for Representative Hussey-Burdick. Okay, thank you, Chair. Your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you very much. Senate Bill 764, Senate Draft 1, House Draft 1, relating to affordable housing. Chair's recommendation is that we adopt amendments proposed by the Commissioner of Financial Institutions, allowing aggregate amount not to exceed 15%, provided that the bank may apply to the Commissioner for approval for up to 20%. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair as amended.
Voting on SB 764 SD1 HD1, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments, knowing the presence of all members. Any members voting no? Any members voting with reservations? Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you very much. Senate Bill 729, Senate Draft 1, House Draft 1, relating to board members. The Chair's recommendation is that we do a sunrise analysis on this measure because we are requiring new licensure, and that however, in the meanwhile, we also direct the Real Estate Commission to develop curriculum for training condo directors, because regardless of whether or not licensure does come or not, I do believe that training would be helpful. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair as amended.
Voting on SB 729 SD1 HD1, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments, knowing the presence of all members. Any members voting no? No for Representative Pierik. Any members voting with reservations? Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you very much. Senate Bill 393, Senate Draft 1, House Draft 1, relate to the landlord-tenant code. The recommendation of the Chair is to one, remove the income cap for participation in the program, and also to, where available, to allow remote video mediation due to issues regarding the availability of mediation in the particular area being impacted. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair as amended.
Voting on SB 393 SD1 HD1, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments, noting the presence of all members. Any members voting no? No for Representative Pierik. Any members voting with reservations? Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much. And finally, on decision-making, Senate Bill 1502, Senate Draft 2, related to transportation. Chair is asking for additional time to work on this measure, so we will defer this and we will repost when decision is ready. And, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. My correction, Senate Bill 1502, Senate Draft 2, relating to transportation. I do have proposed amendments on page 2, line 9, page 2, lines 3, lines 9 to the next page, line 5. We'll delete that section from the bill and add a new section 1A to state a peer-to-peer car sharing program shall ensure that during each car sharing period, the car share shall be insured under a motor vehicle insurance policy that shall provide one primary insurance coverage for each shared car and user, through the peer-to-peer car sharing program in the amounts of not less than 4 times the amount set forth in section 431-10C-301B for death, bodily injury, and property damage per accident, and the cost of defense outside of the limits. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair as amended.
Voting on SB 1502 SD1, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Noting the presence of all members, any members voting no. Any members voting with reservations? Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much. And then finally, on Senate Bill 602, Senate Draft 2, relating to health, this one we will defer to time certain to be announced and reposted by the committee. Okay, thank you very much. We are adjourned.